everyone, I'm Shreya Dhondial. Why is black fungus an epidemic only in India when steroids are used to treat COVID all over the world? Is white fungus that we are now detecting in Patna more dangerous than this black fungus? Why are the elderly going for their second jab coming down with COVID-19? And is the third wave hitting kids the most hype? I'm putting all these questions and much more to one of India's top doctors, Dr. Randeep Guleria. He is the director of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, also member of India's COVID Task Force. Dr. Guleria, thank you very much for joining us here on Debrief once again today. My first question to you is this: has the new strain that is making people sick in India right now reduced the efficacy of the vaccine? I ask you this particular question because early reports that have been authored by scientists of the ICMR are saying that while Covaxin and Covishield are effective at generating immune response against the coronavirus, this appears to generate only half as many antibodies against the B1617 strain. In that case, are we then looking at a third and a fourth jab now for full protection?
So as the virus mutates, and we will have more variants emerging over the next months as we go ahead with this pandemic, because we know that this virus does mutate, although more slowly than the influenza virus. We will have to really study and see how effective the vaccines are, because the virus will try and develop what we call an immune escape mechanism. Therefore, there is a likelihood that in the near future we will need to take a booster jab, and we may need to take regular vaccines as we do for influenza, so as to cover for the variants which may emerge and to make sure that the vaccine efficacy is high as possible. The current data, what it suggests is that although the efficacy of the vaccine may come down slightly with the new variants, it's still well above the 50% mark, which WHO had taken as a cutoff for the efficacy of the vaccine. Remember, most vaccines have an efficacy varying from 80 to more than 90%. And therefore, even if there is a slight decrease, it will still be effective. But and there is a need to do a lot of close monitoring with gene sequencing to see new variants which emerge and evaluate them in terms of the efficacy of the vaccines which are currently being given.
All right, so Dr. Guleria, you're saying the virus is mutating. We know that the efficacy of the vaccine could be coming down slightly, you say. Then why has the government of India increased the gap between two vaccine doses? The government of UK that also uses Covishield has actually decreased this gap.
So every country will have to look at its situation and work depending on how the situation is. The United Kingdom initially had started at 12 weeks, not only for Covishield, which is the AstraZeneca vaccine, but even for the Pfizer vaccine, looking at the situation there. The situation in India is different, and therefore I think we need to keep that in mind. What the data suggests, which has emerged in the last few months, is that as far as the AstraZeneca vaccine is concerned, Covishield, if you were to delay the second shot by 12 weeks, you get a much better immune response and you get more protection, which goes across other strains also. For example, if you give the Covishield vaccine in 4 weeks' time, the immunity is only around 55 to 60%. But if you give it at around 12 weeks, it can go well above 80 to 85%. Also, like you said, there was a concern that if you delay the two shots, will there be a higher chance of infection occurring in those who've got only one shot, especially considering the large number of cases that we have in our country? The data again suggests that if you take one shot of Covishield, the immunity that it gives you is up to 71%. That means it's reasonably acceptable. And therefore, it was felt that looking at the current scenario in terms of public health perspective also, it would be better if the second dose was delayed to 12 weeks. This also gives us the opportunity to be able to vaccinate more and more people with at least one dose to give them some degree of protection. The data from ICMR also suggests that the vaccines that are being given in India are effective against the Indian strain, but we need more data. And like I said, things may change as new mutants evolve. As far as Covaxin is concerned, the duration still remains the same. That is between 4 to 6 weeks as far as the second dose is concerned.
Dr. Guleria, then let me ask you this very frankly. Is the increase in gap because we are short of vaccines? Because that is what a lot of people are saying. The sense also is that the entire vaccination policy has been mismanaged.
So I don't think the vaccine policy has been mismanaged. It's been done in a very graded manner, looking at prioritization. And if you remember, the first priority was healthcare workers, frontline workers. We were able to do that very successfully. The second priority was all those above the age of 45, and that was also done successfully. There was therefore subsequently a need felt that we could open it up for others, looking at two or three things. Remember, now the policy has become very liberal. We have now three vaccine candidates which are being manufactured in India: Covaxin, Covishield, and Sputnik. Also, the government has allowed international vaccine manufacturers to come into India. And there is a lot of hope that vaccines like Pfizer will actually be able to market their products in India. So there is a feeling that the doses will become enough. It's not going to be something that one can do overnight. Look, if you're looking at adults above the age of 18 years, you're looking at more than about 94 crore people. That means you're looking at, if you're giving two doses, almost 2 billion doses. So 2 billion doses will not happen immediately or in a month's time. It will happen over a period of time, and that's why there has to be a graded response. If you say that I need 2 billion doses within this month and I want to vaccinate everyone, logistically it's not possible. And I don't think even if you were to get all the manufacturers into India, we would have so many doses. So it will have to be done in a gradual manner. And I think this will take at least 4 to 6 months minimum for us to really achieve that target. And by that time, more and more vaccines will also come into place. The reason for postponing it is predominantly based on the data which was looked at by INSAGO. Yes, it also makes sense looking at the fact that we would need to vaccinate more people in the current situation. And if you could delay it to 12 weeks, you get more doses available for more and more people. So it makes sense from the science point of view. It makes sense from the public health point of view. But it's not got anything to do with any mismanagement policy, because that has been done in a very structured manner.
So part of this structure was that the senior citizens are priority group. Now senior citizens who are in line to get their second dose are not getting it despite booking it on the CoWIN app. In hindsight, given the shortage, should we have opened vaccination for everyone above the age of 18?
One can have a graded response, and many states are doing that you could look at your high risk group and you could even open it up in a graded manner to 40 and above rather than just 45 and above. And that is a strategy which can also be looked at. But it depends on how many doses each state has and how efficiently they can actually deliver the vaccine.
Dr. Guleria, let's talk about a very interesting experiment that is currently underway in many parts of the world. Can mixing vaccines give us better protection? There are already Spanish studies that are saying that AstraZeneca and Pfizer can actually be mixed together to optimize efficacy. Is that something India could be looking at as well subsequently?
Currently, we don't have enough data as far as the vaccines in India are concerned. There are studies going on even in the UK where they're trying to look at different vaccine mixes, and based on a hypothesis that if you do that, you may get a better immune response because you're using two different platforms, although you're generating the similar types of antibodies against the spike protein. So this is an interesting concept which has 2 or 3 advantages. One, of course, you get more doses, but hypothetically, it may also give you a better immune response. But unless we have more data, it will be a little premature to say that we should start doing that. Whatever is being currently looked at is more from a research point of view. If we get more data in the coming months, yes, this is a possibility which will help us to be able to vaccinate more liberally and try and even see which combination may be more effective as compared to just giving the same vaccine twice.
Dr. Guleria, I've asked you this question on multiple occasions. I'm going to ask you this again because anecdotally, there are still several senior citizens who've gone in for their second jab of Covishield and they have come back and reported getting COVID-19 in the next 4 to 5 days. Is there a pattern here? Is this something you are seeing as well and studying?
So this has been mentioned by a lot of people. I think this is more related not to the vaccine per se, because the vaccine is, as far as the two vaccines are concerned, one is an inactivated virus, the other is using a viral vector, but it's just using part of the virus. So there's no way that the vaccination can cause infection. But lack of COVID appropriate behavior during at the vaccination site with crowding or not being careful can predispose people who are at higher risk to get the infection out there.
Dr. Guleria, as if black fungus wasn't enough, we now have white fungus in our midst. Cases are being reported in Patna. Is it more dangerous than black fungus, and what is this white fungus?
So first, the most important thing to remember is that mucormycosis is not a black fungus. It's a misnomer. Because there is some discoloration of the skin which can happen because it causes decrease in the blood supply. It may give a feeling that this area has become black, and that is why the name has come. If one is having steroids for a long period of time, has underlying predisposing conditions like diabetes, you are predisposed to many fungal infections. The one that is being seen more commonly is mucormycosis, but other fungal infections like aspergillosis can also be there. There are some reports of that, but it is not that much of a problem as mucormycosis is, which is causing predominantly involvement of the sinuses, the eye, and at times can go on to the brain, and of course has nasal involvement. There have been some reports of pulmonary mucormycosis also, that is the infection happening in the lung.
Doctor, there are 3 states now, Assam, Telangana, Rajasthan, who have declared black fungus as an epidemic. Is the rise in cases that alarming? And if yes, what do we do to protect ourselves?
So the rise in cases is significant. A lot of states are reporting an increasing number of cases, and this will probably rise for some more time till we see a downward trend in the number of COVID cases, and after that probably we will see a decline as far as fungal infections is also concerned. I think there is a need to really aggressively work on preventing it from happening rather than really treating it. And therefore, people who are at high risk, people with underlying diabetes, need to have very good sugar control. We have to be very careful about use of steroids, not using it early, because there is data which suggests that early use of steroids predisposes to secondary infection, both bacterial and fungal. And also the dose of steroids and duration of steroids has to be closely monitored, because that itself also predisposes to it. So the underlying viral infection itself, presence of diabetes, and use of steroids all need to be closely monitored if we want to prevent this from happening.
But doctor, here's the thing, steroids are being used not just in India to treat COVID, they are being used all over the world. Then why is black fungus peculiar to only India?
The steroid prescriptions all over the world are very closely monitored. You cannot get steroids over the counter, and it's not something that can be done. We have this whole problem not only from the point of view of steroid use, but from the point of view of large number of antibiotics which are used. We have this whole problem of what we call antimicrobial resistance. So there is a lot of misuse which happens in our country, because you can buy anything over the counter, and sometimes even very high dose medication are purchased and given. I'm aware of one person who had COVID. We admitted that person, but he at home had taken 500 milligrams of methylprednisolone, which is a very high pulse dose. It's not indicated at all. But some doctor told him you can take it at home, and he took it in the drip form. Now this would never be sort of legally or otherwise allowed in the Western world. So we are misusing steroids in a big way as compared to the other parts of the world, because there is no regulation in terms of making sure things are not given over the counter.
Is that the case then with blood thinners as well? People seem to think it helps with COVID-19 and pop it at will.
Again, that is true with blood thinners. There is really no indication for taking blood thinners on day one. And people who have mild illness, which forms 80 to 85% of individuals, don't need to take blood thinners. And this is also a double-edged sword. A lot of use of blood thinners can predispose to bleeding, and you can have bleeding in the stomach in forms of an ulcer bleeding. You could have bleeding at other sites. It could be more serious if you had a bleed in the brain, which could lead to a stroke. So therefore, one should understand that even blood thinners can have side effects and should only be taken if they're indicated. And there are very few indications for taking prolonged blood thinners as far as COVID-19 is concerned. And therefore, it should not be done, especially on an outpatient basis.
Okay. What's your take on the new DRDO drug 2DG? Have you had a chance to use it? Are you looking at it as a breakthrough drug like most are?
So 2DG has now been approved by the DCGI and it is being marketed by an Indian company, Dr. Reddy's Laboratory. We have not really tried it and therefore are planning to do a study to see its efficacy. We need more data before we can say that it will be a big game changer, may or may not be there. So studies are being planned in the All Institute of Medical Sciences to see its efficacy. It's really a little early to say how effective it will be in terms of overall management strategy.
So it's got emergency use protocol. Will it sooner rather than later now become part of the Government of India's treatment protocol as well, sir?
Currently, it is not part of the Government of India protocol because we need more data for a point of view. There are studies which show it may be useful. There are smaller studies, but one would definitely like to have more robust studies which are randomized controlled trials before we can say that yes, this does make a big difference and should be in the guidelines. Many drugs which are not in the guidelines are otherwise used off-label and have been approved by DCGI, like favipiravir. Favipiravir is also not in the guidelines, but it is used extensively. So and it is approved by the DCGI. So approval of drugs is one thing, but looking at the evidence and thereby saying that it should be in the guidelines is another thing.
Okay. So we are being told, and this is something a lot of parents are worried about, we are being told that the third wave could come in the next 6 to 9 months. And when it does, it will possibly impact children the most. But then there are many doctors, pediatricians saying that this fear is completely overhyped. Where do you stand?
So first of all, the issue is we should work to see that we don't have a third wave. The issue is that all viral infections, including influenza and COVID, will come in different waves. Influenza has different peaks. It tends to peak during the monsoon months and the winter months. So there are infections which peak during different types and have some seasonality. The concern here is, of course, that once the second peak comes down, if we make the same mistakes that we made after the first week came down, we may have another rise subsequently. So I think the lessons that we've learned from the first two waves, if we are able to follow those aggressively in terms of COVID appropriate behavior, in terms of very aggressive surveillance, and any hotspot which develops, we be very aggressive in developing it into a containment zone, pushing the vaccine in an aggressive manner in the next few months will really help us to make sure that we don't have a third wave, or if we do have a third wave, it's very, very minimum. The second thing is there is not enough evidence to say that it's going to be predominantly children. The two waves that we've had have not really affected children in a big way. It's been causing them predominantly mild illness. The second wave had a huge number of cases, but there was not enough evidence to say that it was much more in children as compared to adults. So I think the focus still needs to be on adult treatment, prevention, vaccination. I think even in the coming waves, children will be protected because of the very nature of the virus, that it causes less infection in children.
Have we been able to understand or study why COVID-19 is causing less infection in children?
So two or three things. One is that we will have some degree of protection for children because there are trials now ongoing and the data should be out quickly in terms of vaccination in children. Most vaccinologists feel that the vaccines should be safe in children and we should get the trials done quickly. So hopefully in the next 3-4 months, we will have vaccines which will be approved for children. Second is that I think there are multiple factors which could be related to why children are not infected. One factor is that the ACE receptors to which the virus binds to the human cell are relatively less in children and they become more as you grow older. But there are other hypotheses also. So this is something which is being looked at in great detail. But there is enough epidemiological evidence to suggest that the virus, even if a whole family is affected, causes much milder disease in the children. So I think that pattern should continue even as we have new waves coming up.
Okay, so Dr. Guleria, I have three more questions for you, important questions. We'll take a quick break on the show right now and come right back, so do stay with us. Dr. Guleria, who's the director of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, continues to be with us. Dr. Guleria, our daily case count has dipped. It has been dipping consistently, but our daily death toll still remains very high in the 4,000 vicinity. What do we make of this? How do we make sense of this?
So this is a cause of concern. We are having a lot of deaths, not only in Delhi, but across the country, which we need to work aggressively on bringing down. I think we need to do aggressive death audits to see what could be the cause and are there preventable causes. One cause is that it could be that a lot of people are now relying on home isolation and even using oxygen at home. And they wait till the very end when their saturation becomes very low and they're really running out of the cylinder or the oxygen concentrator is at full. And then they rush to the hospital, which leads to worsening of disease and delay in treatment. So I would really say that now that our cases are less and more beds are available, anyone who has comorbidities and his saturation is on the lower side, or any individual whose saturation is falling, should actually take treatment in hospital rather than continue to be at home and take that risk.
But Dr. Guleria, people continue to be at home and take oxygen at home and treat themselves at home because there are no hospital beds available.
That crisis was there some time back. You're right, we had a crisis some time back, but if you go to the Delhi website also, you will find that both from the ICU point of view and oxygen beds, there are a large number of beds which are vacant in most hospitals. The numbers have come down significantly. We had close to 900 to 1,000 patients admitted at one point in time. Now the number has come down to about 500 to 600. So there are therefore that many beds vacant currently because our cases have come down. Both if you look at the number of active cases in Delhi and the cases being reported per day, they have significantly come down. So there is now availability of beds, which probably was not there some time back. That is definitely there. So now with changing scenario, we need to also look at a changing sort of behavior or practice in terms of treating patients.
Dr. Guleria, given the numbers that are coming in and you study them very closely as well, can we safely say that the second wave has peaked? It is ebbing, or is it too early?
In certain areas, definitely it has peaked. It's showing a downward trend. If you look at central India, if you look at western India, we need more data from eastern part and southern part where cases continue to increase. They may peak a little bit later. And after that, we'll have enough data to say whether as a country we have sort of crossed the peak.
Is this dip in numbers coming because a lot of cities, including Delhi, continue to be in lockdown mode? And will we have to remain in lockdown mode to keep our numbers low?
So in my opinion, the containment or lockdown which areas have should be guided by science, and the scientific principle is that if your positivity rate is more than 5%, it's better to continue to have a lockdown. Or if you have more than 60% of your beds which are dedicated for COVID occupied, then it's better to continue with the lockdown, because if you open it up, you may have another surge and you may not be able to manage that. So therefore, depending on these factors, one must take a call on continuing the restrictions till we reach that number.
Dr. Guleria, my last question is on Remdesivir, because there has been so much debate on it. What is your stand on the role of Remdesivir, and what are the learnings that we have got from the second wave treatment? And you've treated a lot of people now in the last 2 months.
So we've already said that the pillars of second wave treatment as far as moderate illness is concerned are basically three. One is good oxygen therapy. Second is use of steroids, but in moderate dose and for a shorter duration. And third is the use of anticoagulants if they are indicated. Remdesivir has just got emergency use authorization. There is data from the UK, from the US, which suggests that it is useful and can be used because it decreases hospital stay, and therefore it continues to be in the guidelines. Also, other drugs which are not the mainstay have got emergency use authorization like tocilizumab also continue, because the data in these, as far as these drugs is concerned, is evolving. More recent trials as far as plasma was concerned showed that even plasma which had high titers of antibodies did not make that much of a difference, and that is why the Joint Monitoring Group and the National Task Force felt that the benefit was not that much, and that's why it was sort of withdrawn.
The virus is mutating, the science is evolving, so the treatments will evolve as well. Dr. Guleria, thank you very much for your time here on CNN News 18. We're also putting this FAQ session on our website, news18.com, in case you want to revisit it. Thank you very much for watching.